Hey guys, we are back this week with another Simpsons recreation, and I could not be more excited for this one. But first, you might notice something different about my threads. Here I'm wearing this new bar apron, and I kind of dig it. Also cuts down on the crotch shots. But feel free to leave a comment below, let me know what you guys think. And again, I'm excited to be partnered with my friends at Squarespace for this video. I'll talk more about that at the end. Okay, this episode of The Simpsons debuted back in 1991. It might have been the first cocktail that a young cocktail chemist ever saw on TV. Let's take a look.
Well, supoib.
Alright, let's see how supoib this actually is. We'll try to recreate it exactly as Bart does. We have the benefit of actually seeing the recipe followed right here. We're going to start with our sweet vermouth, which is an aromatized wine that's flavored with herbs, spices, and fruit. And Bart's recipe calls for 1/2 ounce or about 15 mils of this. And next we need our whiskey, which can be a bourbon or a rye. Here we're going to use a bourbon, 1.5 ounces or 45 mils. And then it calls for 1 dash of Angostura bitters. Now Bart actually shakes this drink, which really isn't typical of a Manhattan. In fact, most spirit-forward cocktails are stirred to prevent over-dilution. If you want to learn more about this, I did a whole video on shaking versus stirring. And then we'll just strain this into a cocktail glass, and just as Bart does, grab one of those bright red cherries and drop it in. Alright, let's find out if this Manhattan is indeed supoib. So yeah, this is a really solid Manhattan. As long as you're using quality ingredients, you can't really go wrong with this recipe. Now as for these bright red, chewy maraschino cherries, I might pass on this one. Now I'll show you my go-to Manhattan. Starting with the vermouth, we're using Carpano Antica, which is full-bodied and stands up really well against whiskey. We're going to add 1 ounce or 30 mils to a mixing glass. Now for the whiskey, we're going to use a rye instead of a bourbon, where the majority of the mash bill here is going to be a rye instead of corn. It's going to be a little bit spicier than the mellow corn, so 2 ounces or 60 mils in the glass. Hit that with not 1, but 2 dashes of our Ango bitters, and then we're going to stir that for about 60 seconds or so to cool it down and dilute it a bit. Fun way to remember this cocktail spec is 212, which is both the area code of Manhattan as well as the ratio of 2 ounces rye, 1 ounces sweet vermouth to 2 dashes bitters. Now you're going to grab a nicely chilled Nick and Nora glass, and we're going to strain that right in. Instead of those bright red cherries, I highly recommend springing for one of these Luxardo cherries. They are phenomenal. Cheers guys, let's give this one a taste. And honestly, for me, this is just perfect. It's a little bit heavier on the vermouth based on this ratio, but that rich Carpano Antica just stands up so well against this rye, and those cherries, my God, those cherries, so good. Now I'm going to throw one more variation at you guys, and that is the perfect Manhattan. So the way to make this is actually to start with 1/2 ounce or 15 mils of your sweet vermouth, and then we're going to add another 1/2 ounce or 15 mils of a dry vermouth. Here I'm using Dolan. Now it's called the perfect Manhattan because of this equal parts ratio of dry and sweet vermouth. Again, we're going to do 2 ounces or 60 mils of our rye, and then 2 dashes of Ango bitters. Make sure to stir the drink top-wise for about 45 to 60 seconds, strain into our chilled Nick and Nora, drop in that cherry, and now let's just do a back-to-back comparison of the last 2 drinks. So here's our normal Manhattan with sweet vermouth, amazing, versus our perfect Manhattan with equal parts sweet and dry vermouth. That's really nice. It's got a little bit more of a crisper, brighter feel to it, but because I have a sweet tooth, I slightly prefer the original. So if you guys have been to my website, I actually built that on Squarespace, and I really have loved the experience. You can create a beautiful website or an online store with an award-winning template using their all-in-one platform. There's nothing to install, patch, or upgrade ever. You'll also get this award-winning 24/7 customer support. So they offer a unique domain experience that's fully transparent and simple to set up, and they're used by a wide range of creatives and people, musicians, designers, artists, and restaurants, and more. So go to squarespace.com/cocktail to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase.